At the beginning of Mark chapter 3, we hear about a dramatic encounter. Jesus goes into the temple on the Sabbath and encounters a man with a withered hand. Some are watching the encounter, wondering whether Jesus will break the Sabbath law by healing on the day of rest. It's one of the rare occasions where the Gospels speak of Jesus being angry because of their hardness of heart. Jesus does heal the fellow, and the others leave with the intent to put Jesus to death. Their reaction is startling, and while their decision to plot to kill Jesus has plenty of drama of its own, what makes Jesus angry is their utter indifference to the person who is suffering, the person who is now healed. There is no empathy, no entering into the situation of the person who is crippled, no feeling of his pain, and thus no feeling of his unbelievable joy at being healed. It's easy to stand in quick judgment of those who can be so oblivious to the suffering of others, and after the healing, to their joy. We can resonate with Jesus' anger, but we might do well to think carefully before we point the finger. Are we so different? On our news programs and in our online accessing of news, we hear a great deal about pain and suffering, about violence and conflict. And many of us only listen in a vague sort of way. There is a steady flow of crises, famines, wars, refugees and refugee camps, people who are trafficked, homeless, living in dire poverty. And all of that has made many of us somewhat immune from really hearing and empathizing with those who are suffering. We hear the stories without feeling any emotional response. Pope Francis has given a name to this phenomenon, calling it a globalization of indifference. In one of his daily homilies in Rome, he noted how this was evident in our priorities and our responses to suffering. He said, "If a computer breaks, it's a tragedy, but poverty, the needs and dramas of so many people end up being considered normal. If on a winter's night here on the Via Ottaviano, for example, someone dies, that is not news. If there are children in so many parts of the world who have nothing to eat, that is not news. It seems normal. It cannot be so. That some homeless people should freeze to death on the street, this doesn't make the news. On the contrary, when the stock market drops 10 points, it constitutes a tragedy. In this way, people are thrown aside as if they were trash. And when a boat full of migrants sunk off the coast of Sicily, killing 360 people, Pope Francis went to the site. And in his homily, he said passionately, "Has any one of us wept because of this situation and others like it? Has any one of us grieved for the death of these brothers and sisters? Has any one of us wept for these persons who were on the boat, for the young mothers carrying their babies, for those men who were looking for a means of supporting their families? We are a society which has forgotten how to weep, how to experience compassion, suffering with others. The globalization of indifference has taken from us the ability to weep." It is a tendency of our age, but perhaps not so different from other ages. When we are healthy and comfortable, we tend to get self-absorbed, to forget about others, and to find ways to immunize ourselves from their problems, their sufferings, the injustices they endure. As Christian community, it is vital that we never lose sight of how our Messiah died on a cross to show us the depth of God's love and to redeem us. That we never lose sight of how he said he was in our midst in those who suffer, the sick and the prisoner, the naked and the stranger, the hungry and the thirsty. Our faith should spur us on to counter any indifference growing in our minds and hearts, should stir us to tears, but also to solidarity, to compassion, to action. Near the beginning of Mark's Gospel, a leper comes to Jesus and says, "If you want to, you can make me well." And Jesus says, "I do want to," and heals him. There's a beautiful accompanying story from the Jewish tradition. Rabbi Abraham Heschel relates that when God, the Holy One, gets up in the morning, God gathers the angels of heaven around and asks this simple question: where does my creation need mending today? May we open ourselves daily to the needs of others, and empowered by the Holy Spirit, may we be instruments of the world's healing.